youth all over the world have been known as the change agents. Why do we fail to see like the Ugandan youth like really assuming their position and coming together really for a noble cause like to be fought against or something like that?
Well, for many years, Uganda's youth were complacent in this illusion of the NRM's prosperity. We were very happy, as I said, the atmosphere in Uganda, relative to many other countries in Africa, seems to be free, seems to be open. Nightclubs are open. The chaos of the city,
English Premier League is on.
Yes, there is so much stimulation in the country that the average young person was apolitical for a long time. So that indifference, emphasis on sports, entertainment, is what kept them indifferent. They've just begun to wake up now when it's really becoming clear that there's a problem in the country. And that's why you can see many of them were involved in the demonstrations. Why have they been unable to rise up? Because of that reason I've given. Secondly, of course, the country basically has broken them down. Many of them are unemployed. There are no facilities. People are just barely struggling. So it's very difficult to start thinking philosophically about change and democracy when you can just barely even pick up feed yourself, or don't know where the next job or your first job will come from. So, and also Ugandans haven't been in tradition, organizers. They're not well known to be organized. We individually rise up, demonstrate. Many young people call into the FM radio stations, but it's not the same as organized groups like trade unions or, let's say, a Facebook group getting together and really becoming active on the street. Maybe it will come in the next few years as this breakdown of the economy and the society continues, but for the time being, the young people haven't been that engaged. So even things being at this stage here, they just barely begin to wake up to the fact that now the situation is worse than they'd expected. So maybe they'll be watched over the next 3-4 years to see what they'll do.
Kindly share us your experience as a media practitioner, the kind of environment you've been in, and the various governments you've witnessed prior to this one that came in 1996.
86. Well, it's, as I say, it's if you compare Uganda to some of the extreme regimes in the Middle East and Africa, I can see why many people think of Uganda as a free country. And to some extent, the media is relatively open. I don't know about free, but at least fairly open. But now that also is the media in Kampala, where of course there are a lot of Western embassies, international organizations, human rights groups, NGOs, activists, that there's only so far you can go in clamping down on media. But of course in the countryside, in those small little towns where there are a few solitary radio stations, resident district commissioners come in regularly and clamp down on talk shows and journalists. So the real Uganda of a majority is what you see in the countryside, what we call upcountry in Uganda. Kampala is not that typical. The print media, same story. You can general stories about corruption, incompetence, questioning why substandard equipment was purchased by the government. That the government is confident enough to be able to handle. But of course, the off-limits topics are things like the president and his family, events of State House, the army, the intelligence services. And that's where the true information is. That is where the true state is run in Uganda. So you can read about KCC, the condition of the roads. You can read about the High Court, the independence of the judiciary, the civil service. Criticize a few key government ministers, but that's not where core power in Uganda is. So Museveni has managed to center power around himself in such a way that everything else now is up for discussion, which is why people get this impression that Uganda is vigorous, but then when you touch the critical areas of sensitivity, then he reacts a bit like the West. The perception in the West of Western media freedom, of expression, you can say anything, until WikiLeaks begins publishing those big cables, then we really begin to see the West. The true information, the true facts that shape the world and shape foreign policy are what WikiLeaks predict. And there, when the West went native and did the same things African countries do, create rape charges and all that. But as long as we discuss general things, criticize besides George Bush, Barack Obama, besides Republicans. That's generic. You can live with that. So that's what Uganda is like. So the US is just a much more sophisticated and industrialized version of Uganda. The difference between this and governments before this, the governments before this tended to clamp down overtly. I don't know, when I think about it now, I just wonder why, but Idi Amin's government, Milton Obote's, especially Milton Obote's second government, would clamp down and ban newspapers that consistently published anti-government material. The Museveni government understood that wasn't necessary. When they first took power, that's what they used to do, clamping to closing down papers. Then as the 1990s began and Uganda was opening up and starting to gain, being contrasted in the West with Amin and Obote governments, they began actually seeing the value of appearing and posturing as open. So they tolerated so many things because they gained more by the newspapers being open and seen as open, by having a newspaper like the New Vision, government paper, but fairly objective, at least, balanced. That helped them. So they basically put up with all of this because they got more mileage from the newspapers seeming to be vibrant than being closed down. But of course, my personal view and research is that the Obote and the main governments are not the governments that are now widely perceived around the world, but that's a whole other story. That's the basic story. Yeah. Typical third world African country, as I said, and only difference between Uganda and some of the others, and even the government and its predecessors in Uganda, is just that the President Museveni and his aides and top lieutenants were just smart enough to see that take power, know where world power is, position yourself as an ally of world power. At that time it was Washington and London, and then you can get away with murder.
So what are your perhaps aspirations and future prospects with the Uganda record? Like, what new thing are you offering that we can't really find in these other media houses?
Well, it usually publishes the kind of materials you just say that other media houses can't publish. Not that they don't know it, but they can't dare publish for obvious reasons. One, the media has become commercial in Uganda.
Yeah.
So it becomes difficult for you to have extremely sensitive material, especially political material, in newspapers. One, the government could clamp down on you. Even if the government doesn't clamp down on you, the advertisers themselves shy away from anybody seen as anti-government. Why do they shy away? Are they strong enough to withstand government pressure? Because, as you well know about Uganda, really, a lot of these investors, when they come to Uganda, go to State House, meet the president. And not to the Uganda Investment Authority, but to State House. So they know very well that they are really here at the mercy of the
president.
Yes, I can't say government, that's too wide. It's more like State House and the president. So that's why people who seem to be powerful, who the government should, in a sense, be afraid to offend, become the ones afraid to offend the government. So the Uganda Record publishes that kind of information. The news, the government will not want it to know. Of course, it will never hope to get adverts from the mainstream media advertisers, partly because of its sensitive information. And even if it wasn't sensitive, the internet is not well developed in Uganda.
Yeah, it's a few of us who can access.
Yes, so why should anybody advertise on an online newspaper when there is a main print newspaper already that is viewed by the wider public? So in that sense, the Uganda Record will remain a labor of love, struggle on. Donations from friends and sympathizers, a bit of the other work I do elsewhere in the media that subsidizes it, but it can't become a strong publication for that reason I've given. The dual problem of best case scenario, even if it was a sports newspaper, too few hits on the internet, so therefore too little advertising revenue. And now what it is, worst of all, is it's very, very sensitive information. You wouldn't blame advertisers for fearing to advertise.
Yeah, so for such kind of investigative journalism, you've been in and out of jail, in and out of court, spending on lawyers and what keeps you moving? What really motivates you to do your work? And like some of them who think we are the most powerful journalists in the country or something.
Well, just that conviction that I've got a particular aversion to evil. There's some kind of malicious actions by states really just basically offend me. So that's the truth. I'm interested in us getting to know. When I hear these things that are done, extrajudicial killings, illegal arrests, that sort of thing, that of course is something I need to fight against. And two, I'm also particularly bothered by the ignorance in which we live, not knowing our history. The people who welcomed us liberators are the ones who are punishing us, and we did not know this. So my main job now is to basically expose deception, especially that redressing history, exposing deception. That's the main purpose of the Uganda record. And my work in the Daily Monitor, KFM, and everywhere. I can't believe how gullible people are, but people are gullible. People don't ask questions, and even international media.
Yes, people.
There's obvious things, very obvious facts. You know, the bombings take place, and one of the inconsistencies we saw, they arrested Eritreans first, and Ethiopians, then Pakistanis, and Kenyans, and finally Somalis, then it's Ugandans confessing. So much events take place in northern Uganda, people are killed, and it's automatically believed that this is the LRA all the time. And I say, but are you sure it's the LRA all the time? Haven't you seen stories that say people dressed as the LRA did some of these things, but people basically take things on the surface? So to help people go beyond the surface, that's what my specialty is. It's rewarding just as it is. Really, what more can you do? If for some of us, I know what you mean by asking that question, but it's a list I can do.